Welcome back. Florida Republican Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart has been one of the strongest advocates here in Washington for removing Nicolás Maduro from power. Earlier, I spoke with him about this weekend's events and whether he foresees U.S. intervention elsewhere in the hemisphere. Congressman, I know you have strong feelings on this. For Americans who are not deeply read in on Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, what would you tell them is the legal and moral justification for what the Trump administration has done?
He's the head of one of the wealthiest, most aggressive, and most dangerous narco cartels in the entire planet. His cartel is responsible for the death of more Americans by the drugs that he has sent across the United States than ISIS and Hezbollah and Al Qaeda combined. This is a very dangerous individual who's not a head of state, who's not recognized as a head of state by the United States and multiple other countries. He is the head of a narco-terrorist organization. It's as if the United States would have went to another country to grab El Chapo and brought him back to the United States, except that El Chapo had taken over a country using force and terror.
Do you have any reservations, Congressman, about the way the U.S. military did it, the 32 or so odd Cubans who were in the security detail around Nicolás Maduro who were killed in the operation?
First place, I'm in awe of what the U.S. military has done. I think this is going to be studied for generations, not only by the U.S. military, but by militaries around the world. This is going to be taught. It was an amazing, just incredible way that they performed this very difficult mission, number one. And as far as how he was treated, how what the circumstances are. No, this is a very dangerous individual. He's the head of a narco trafficking group called Cartel de los Soles, Cartel of the Suns, one of the wealthiest, one of the most ruthless, and one of the most dangerous cartels on the planet. And I applaud the president for doing something, by the way, that other presidents had talked about. Remember, as you well know, he has a bounty on his head put by President Biden. President Biden put I think it was a $25 million bounty on his head, saying, we got to get this guy. It took President Trump actually using the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces to go get him, something that Biden should have done, and other presidents, frankly, including Republican presidents, should have done before.
What comes next in Venezuela?
It's not a simple task, right? That cartel, even though the head of the cartel is gone, is still there. It's a very violent cartel. However,
meaning many regime figures remain in power.
Correct. And those are cartel figures. All right, it's not a government. It's a cartel. It's a criminal organization that has taken by force and by terror a country. So they're still there. But President Trump has a lot of leverage, and he's been talking about using that leverage to make sure that those who are there now start behaving in a way that is not against the security interests of the United States and also the interests of the Venezuelan people, which means that there's going to have to be a period of transition. And ultimately, obviously, I think the goal should be for elections so that the Venezuelan people can make the decision as to who they want to run the government. And I will tell you, when there are elections, that's a country that is very grateful to President Trump and to the American people for the solidarity in getting rid of this narco cartel, the head of this narco cartel.
Are you in any way concerned, Congressman, about President Trump's remarks suggesting that Maria Elvira Machado does not have legitimacy within Venezuela as a potential opposition figure, leader, and potential leader of the country?
I will tell you, I am not concerned at all about President Trump. Look, he's a master negotiator. It's pretty clear that he knows how to get what he wants to get, and he has the courage and the wisdom how to use our armed forces in a way that, frankly, very few presidents in history have been able to do as well as he has. Now, do I think there has to be a transition towards democracy? Yes. Do I think that when the people of Venezuela can elect their future leader, that Maria Corina Machado is probably going to be elected? Absolutely, because she has a history of fighting that regime, fighting the cartels, of bravery, and in a really kind of a stolen election by Maduro, she's still got over 70% of the vote. So she has a history of doing that. There has to be a transition, and I commend President Trump. He wants to make sure that he has and he uses all the leverage that he has, and it's a lot of it, to making sure that Venezuela is no longer controlled by this narco cartel.
Congressman, in that transition period, do you believe that the president will use the leverage you just described to persuade the cartel regime figures still in power to leave voluntarily, or will we have to arrest them with military action as well?
Look, I think they got the message, and you saw it in the attitude, the dramatic attitude. You know, when it first happened, they were all, upset, and then all of a sudden, you saw the person who seems to be at least temporarily, potentially in charge there, saying now, okay, no, I got to work with the United States. Look, I hope they got the message. Maduro didn't believe it. He thought that, Biden was still president. Everybody understands that when President Trump wants to do something, he does it. And when it comes to protecting the American lives and the security interests of the United States, nobody is more aggressive, and I would add, has been more effective than President Trump. I hope they got the message. And remember, he offered a lot of off-ramps to Maduro to avoid having to use the U.S. military. But again, if push comes to shove, if the remaining people in the cartel think that they can continue to do what they've been doing, I think they're going to end up either in the same position that Maduro is in, or in the position that Soleimani found himself in. And as you know, they had to find Soleimani, pick him up with basically a broom, right?
2026 has just dawned. What does what we've seen transpire in Venezuela mean, Congressman, in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Colombia?
I think this is, I really generally believe, I've said this, by the way, not just now. I've always believed that these other tyrannies, these anti-American terrorist tyrannies in this hemisphere will not survive these remaining 3 years of a Trump presidency. Why? Because presidents have been complaining about them, have been upset about what the damage that these regimes have done to their country, to their people, but also to the United States, including murdering Americans and kidnapping Americans and harboring terrorists. This is a president who's not willing to just put up with that kind of garbage. He's demonstrated it with what he's done in Iran, with what he did to protect Christians, by the way, in Nigeria, and I thank him for that as well, and what he just did in Venezuela, picking up a violent terrorist narco cartel head and bringing him to justice in the United States. It sounds like a movie. It took President Trump and the United States Armed Forces. No one else could do it.
So we're going militarily into those other countries, you believe?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the Cuban regime has not been this weak in its almost 70 years of dictatorship. The people are hitting the streets pretty much almost every night. They're desperate to get rid of that regime. It's a violent regime. But here's the difference. If they go out and they massively do what they did under President Biden, by the way, when the Cuban people turned out en masse in the summer, when President Biden was in the White House, President Biden basically just ignored it. As we've seen from this president in his attitude towards what's going on in Iran, let me tell you, if that happens in Cuba, I would not want to be those that start, shooting on the Cuban people 90 miles away from the United States, a terrorist, state-sponsored terrorism. I think they're now on notice that it's a different day, it's a different era, it's an era of American strength and support for freedom, for democracy, and as important, if not more, for the national interests of the United States.
Congressman Mario Díaz-Balart, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Good to see you, sir.